Good morning. The going today, they have a memorial day, huh? I guess it's a memorial day. They want to remind themselves something that happened in the past, and today it got nothing to do with whatever that happened. And just the goyim live in the history. What are they? But the Hal Israel, a festival that the Hal Israel has, it's not a memorial day. On that day itself, the hashpah of that day, what happens on that day is what happened in the past. Whether it's a Pesach, is the Zeman of Pesach itself. Like Zohar HaKadosh says, that the Zeman is not one line, it's a circle, and goes mamash on that point that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought the Hal Israel out of Mitzrayim. And that stays forever. That stays forever. It's not a memorial of a just physical sense. It's mamash ruach, and everything stays forever. Now, our Torah is forever, everlasting Torah. Now, Torah addresses different issues in life. We have dynamic of life changes. And because of that, Torah is addressing different issues. And subjects in Torah, somebody cannot say that they have a mastery over all of the Torah. It's almost impossible. People are that they go to a subject matter, and that everlasting Torah, they make it to understand and digestible for those that they need in that subject matter. And Baruch Hashem, here we have a privilege to have somebody who has the mastery of halacha of Torah in medicine. And not only he wants to help a small group in Israel, but it's global, internationally, to help and to provide the halakha. And you should know, as a rabbi of Talmud, that's the most complicated thing to provide. Because there are many couples out there, there are many people out there, they have problems in medicine and we don't know how to treat in halakha. We rabbanim, a lot of times are paralyzed. We don't know how to go about it, how to make it. A couple have a problem, a man has a problem, and the halakha view, how should we go about it? We cannot ask just a doctor and do. We have to go with the regulation of halakha, everlasting Torah. Now we have people that they are specialized in these areas to help. And this type of people are very unique. We don't have so many of them. In other words, there were couples that they had some problem in intimacy. We spoke to a rabbi and they helped them out. Baruch Hashem now is going infertility. There are couples, many years they are suffered how to have children. And they are rabbanim to help them out, to get them the things that they need. A lot of issues like that. Now Baruch Hashem, the Rav made Torah Habayit, right? Torah Habayit in Israel that helps out. And internationally, they get in touch with the rabbi, a lot of rabbani from different places. And the rabbi would be available till Tuesday. And if anybody wants to talk to rabbi, or you as a friend, you have friends that they need that type of material, Baruch Hashem, the Rav could make himself available for those that they need to help them. See, he is very Leshem Shamayim. He told me that he wants to come to Los Angeles because last time he came, he saw that a lot of people got helped, and he wants to help. He wants to help. If a couple that they have pain, a couple that the light, they don't have that light of life in their home, and he could, with his knowledge, and Baruch Hashem, with his expertise, could provide that light, he would be more than happy to do. Therefore, you, or if you know somebody that needs that help, please be in touch with us, and we could connect. Thank you very much for coming, and again to Los Angeles, and visiting Los Angeles.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Levi Chaim. I'd like to thank Kollel, Yachad Kollel for inviting me again to speak. Your word-warm introduction, I appreciate this. Baruch Hashem, since I was in Los Angeles last year, I have managed to help and assist many of the local rabbanim and many people in the community with complex halachic questions on a whole different series of issues. Today, what I'm going to be speaking about is something which is very, very important on end-of-life issues. End-of-life issues, unfortunately, most of us at one time or another, we're going to come across, whether it's elderly parent or grandparent, or Khalila, sometimes with children who are ill, and there are very difficult questions which we have to deal with when it comes to the end of life. Today I'm going to be giving as many guidelines as I can, but obviously if there are any questions they have to be asked on a case-by-case basis, as it's going to be very difficult to explain everything in the hour or so which we have today. So we're going to be speaking about what the quality of life means. How does the doctors of the government determine what is the end of life? We'll talk about a living will. I'm sure many of you have heard of healthcare proxy, talking about people in palliative care or in a hospice. There are many different questions, whether they are medical, ethical, and obviously from a halakha point of view. Should you sign a DNR form? This is something which I was in New York a couple of months ago, in Miami, giving lectures there, and the number one question which I had received was about this. Do you sign a DNR form? What should you do? And this is what I'm going to be speaking about today, B'ezrat Hashem. So the first thing we have to realize is that the Torah says, "Ushmartem et chukotai v'et mishpatai asher yaseh otam ha'adam v'chai bahem ani Hashem." V'chai bahem. What does v'chai bahem mean? That you have to live for the Torah. You have to live. The Torah is giving us life, and it's giving us the responsibility to look after our life. So much so that for nearly every single of the mitzvot, if you have a choice of, let's say for example, somebody Khalila has severe chest pains on Shabbat, on Yom Kippur, and do you say to yourself, what if today's Yom Kippur, can I phone my hospital, can I phone the doctor? Yes, you can. If there's a chashash, pikuach nefesh, if there's a chance that this person is going to be severely ill, I'm not talking about someone just has a little mild pain, and he thinks he needs to see the doctor, then he has to go. It's a mitzvah, an obligation, it's mandatory on Shabbat to call the hospital or to drive to the hospital. That is the chai bahem. The Shulchan Aruch says in Hilchot Shabbat, Mi sheyesh lo choli shel sakana, somebody who is ill and has it in danger to his life, mitzvah alav lechalel Shabbat. It's a mitzvah, it's an obligation and a mitzvah to be mechalel Shabbat. Ve'azavi ze meshubach. Somebody who is going to quickly, the quicker you go, if somebody in Bet Knesset, suddenly an old man, and you feel that he has a heart attack in the middle of Kriyat Torah, the person who calls the ambulance first, he has the biggest mitzvah. The person who asks, hey, what do I do? Rabbi, should I call the ambulance, should I not call? It is as if that this person is killing this person. Why? You don't have time to ask questions now. Now, you have to phone the ambulance. You have to make sure a doctor comes. If there's a doctor in the Bet Knesset, so obviously, you can ask him, doctor, what do we do? But if there isn't, then you have to go. And it's so much so that normally in halakha we say that we follow the majority. But even if someone sees a car accident, severe car accident, he's walking out, sees outside, I mean, he doesn't know if it's a Jewish person, a non-Jewish person, he doesn't know if it's a fatal accident. And I'm not talking about it just hit bumper to bumper. There seems to be a serious car accident. The car's upside down. You run there and you see people who need help. You don't have to start saying, are they Jewish, are they not Jewish, are they seriously injured or not? No, you go. You call the police. You call the ambulance. Say, this is what we have to do. Even if there's a safek, I leave time for questions afterwards. Even if it's a safek, even if you're in doubt. Obviously, if you're going as a non-Jewish, we won't have our phones with us. You suddenly see a non-Jewish person, do me a favor, please phone the the ambulance as soon as possible. This is what we learn. So, the first thing we have to understand is that every single second of life is so important. Every single second. Judaism values every second. There's something called a gosses. A gosses is somebody who's on his last breath. That means somebody's dying. My mother passed away of cancer. She had terminal cancer about 9 years ago. And we were there when she passed away, Rahman al-Itzlan. And you can see when somebody's taking their last breath. And the halakha says, the Gemara in Shabbat says that when you have a gosses, somebody that they're living their last breath, you shouldn't even touch them unless they need some medical assistance. Why? Because we're worried that if you touch them or even close their eyes, that you might shorten their life even by 1 second. In Judaism, you're not allowed to shorten your life even by 1 second. So on the other side, we also have to appreciate every second of our lives as well, you know. Very often people become much more productive when Khalila they have some sort of terminal illness or as they get older. But in Judaism, we have to realize from the other side as well, every second is vital. Every second is important. Every second has to be productive. How much time do we waste? It's so important. Baruch Hashem, we have here Memorial Day, and people come to learn Torah. This is a testimony to the Rabbanim here, a testimony to the Kehillah, that they appreciate life. But appreciating life also means that we're not allowed to chas v'shalom reduce the life of a person, even a dying person. A gosses harei hu chai lekol davar, says the Mishnah. So much so, even a fetus. You might argue, a woman who is pregnant, even within 40 days, if she is worried, if there's a question of danger to the fetus, a pregnant woman, at the first few weeks of pregnancy, I'm going to quote here Rabbi Vadia, Chazon Vadia, "Mechalalim Shabbat av al ubar shebe'mei imo." You're allowed to be mechalel Shabbat, even for a pregnant woman, even if she's in the beginning of pregnancy, toch 40 yom, within the first 40 days. שלעניין המצוות אומרים חלל עליו השבת אחד כדי לשמור שבתות הרבה. This is what Balakha, this is what Chacham Ovadia says. This is Halakha Lema'aseh. I admit it might not be so, very often a pregnant woman at the beginning needs to be Mechalel Shabbat, but if there's such a situation, you're allowed. This is how we value life, even the life of a fetus the first few weeks. So, we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be focusing today about the terminally ill. A terminal illness means somebody that the doctors have given a prognosis, meaning that he does not have a long time to live. Normally 12 months, that's what we say. Unfortunately, it could be somebody with cancer, and the prognosis, it's already such a developed stage that the doctors know from their experience they may have a few months to live. In Halakha, we call this Chaye Sha'ah. So beforehand, just to get the terminology correct, we spoke about a gosses. A gosses is somebody literally in the last minutes, hours, or couple of days, where they're taking their last breath. That's a gosses. That means it's, both gosses, most probably they're going to die very shortly. The Halakha says, for example, if somebody comes and says, I met your family member who was a gosses 3 days ago, they already start in Shiva, because they can be sure gosses doesn't live more than 3 days. That means it's like the end of the life. A Chaye Sha'ah is not a gosses, it's somebody who's terminally ill. That means there's no cure. However, slowly, he's going to be, his life is coming to an end. How long is this? So there's a bit of a difference of opinion, but there's a tshuva of Moshe Feinstein, the Igot Moshe, who gives a limit of 12 months. That means if the doctors say you have 12 months to live, then that person has a definition of Chaye Sha'ah. That means his life is limited. Okay, and there are many different halakha ramifications to somebody who has Chayei Shem. And this is more or less the accepted halakha. Now, in America, in London, in the United Kingdom where I was born, or in Israel where I live now, we have something which is called Advanced Directive. I want to speak about this for a couple of moments because it's important to understand. An Advanced Directive can mean it's a living will. Normally we associate a will as to whom I'm going to be living my assets, my money. That's how we normally understand as a will. And people, they write, obviously according to the halakha, you have to write one which is in accordance to halakha. However, there's a medical will. A medical will allows the person, again from a legal point of view, to direct the doctors as to how the last few months or years of life he's going to live. And he can write a will, and this is actually encouraged by doctors, saying, I do not want to have, and he can be a healthy guy, a guy in his 30s, 40s, everything's fine, and he's writing this will for, when he's going to be 90. He said, I'm going to write a will, and this is what I want the doctors to do or not to do. It's called an advanced directive or a living will regarding the medical procedures which he would want or not want when he gets to hospital. Or there's something called a healthcare proxy, which is basically an agent, a member of a family or a friend, that he's going to decide. You're going to be giving him the power of attorney. You're going to be giving him the decision making as to how you are going, what treatment is going to be done or not done to you during your hospitalization. Okay, these are two important things. And you can, this is what a DNR. DNR means do not resuscitate. That means someone can decide if a 18-year-old guy has suddenly collapses in the street, you call the ambulance, what are they going to do? They're going to start resuscitating him. We're going to try and get back the heart. They're going to put him in a respirator. They're going to try and make him live. And more often than not, you're able to help make somebody live. You'll be able to give back the life and resuscitate a person. They take him to hospital, make sure there's no damage. And very often people had a serious crash, they had a serious fall, and that's it. They're living again for many, many more years. The question is, what happens if someone's in a nursing home? They can have Alzheimer's, they can have many different issues, different problems. Suddenly has a heart attack. What do you do in such a situation? And when people put their parents or their loved ones into a place where they're going to be looking after them in the last years of their life, they're going to ask them, would you like us to resuscitate them if they have a heart attack? And very often they put pressure, saying, listen, quality of life, it's really important. What are you going to gain of having resuscitation? We might break their ribs, we might cause damage. What are they going to get? It might not work. So we recommend you, either they'll tell the patients, why don't you write a living will stating that I do not want you to resuscitate me in the event that I have a heart attack, or I don't want you to intubate me. That means to give me oxygen, put in oxygen tubes in an event that I've stopped breathing. I want to die in peace. This is what a healthcare proxy. They might come to the family and they'll say, your parent didn't write a living will, but they did give you power of medical attorney. It's not, regarding finances. And we want to ask you, what do you want to do? Are you interested in resuscitation, or should we, let's say they already went to hospital, should we take off the ventilator? These are questions which are going to be asked, and very often we put a lot of pressure. And I've spoken to many doctors in the States, and many people, and the doctors put a lot of pressure on people, saying, no, sign the DNO. Don't give him a feeding tube. Very often, at a certain age, we'll speak about it a bit later, with Alzheimer's patients, that they lose the ability to breathe, to swallow, and they have to give them an oxygen mask, or they have to feed them artificially. And we say, why do this? It's an operation. Sometimes they have to attach a feeding tube directly to the intestine, and there's a danger there, and these are difficult questions. These are very difficult questions, and it's very difficult for the family as well. Sometimes it can be financial costs, it's an emotional question. Sometimes they don't have the actual strength, the emotional strength to go through with it. And they say, if the doctors say, you don't need a feeding tube, if they say do not resuscitate, then okay. They don't have, you need a lot of strength to fight the doctors. Sometimes it's fighting the system. Sometimes you can't cope. Sometimes you work, a lot of finances. And that's why when people put pressure on people to sign, they also have to be very careful signing these documents, because very often we don't know what's going to happen. Now we're going to be given some examples later. Are you obligated to resuscitate in all situations? And we're going to see there are certain situations where you don't have to resuscitate. We're going to see. But a healthy guy in his 30s, 40s, or 50s, 60s, it doesn't matter when, to write an advance directive, to write a living will, when he doesn't know what's going to happen, how can you do such a thing? You're putting your hands in the, where you don't know. If you ask, somebody phones me up and they say, Rabbi, my elderly mother, do we have to resuscitate or not? So then, according to this particular situation, we'll have to weigh up and see if, according to the halakha, you do or you don't. But you're not going to know in advance. So therefore, you have to be very careful. And actually, there is a living will by the RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America, or there's an Yehuda healthcare proxy. There are organizations like, I think it's called Chaim Arukim, where they deal with these type of things, which is very important, because someone might say, okay, I'm not going to write a living will, but I'm going to have a healthcare proxy that my family are going to take care of me, and they're religious, and I'm sure they're going to do what the halakha says. But not always they can do that. Sometimes there can be disagreements amongst the siblings. And like I said, sometimes they don't have the emotional strength to go through this, or sometimes they just take the word of the doctors at face value, and they didn't think about it further, they didn't know, they didn't realize, and they'll write. And they'll say, okay, you don't have to resuscitate, you don't have to give a feeding tube, and it could be that they're causing death to their loved one, where there could have been something else. And I can give you information, if anybody needs, about different ways of going through this. So we're going to carry on. There are a few, again, definitions which we have to understand. There's something called curative care. Curative care means that you can give care where you can cure somebody. That means medical is very advanced. Somebody has cancer. Not everyone who has cancer or has some heart condition or kidney condition or whatever condition it may be, very often we can cure people. And obviously, from a halakha point of view, at whatever age, if there is a cure, then you have to take the cure. You're not allowed to, when there's availability of medicine, of treatment, you should not give that up. That is akin as to killing yourself. It's like starving yourself to death. There's absolutely no way in the halakha that would be allowed. But unfortunately, not everybody can be cured. That's what a terminal illness means. A terminal illness means that as of today, the science does not have a cure for you. So this is what we call palliative care. At the end of life, we try and regulate pain. We try and give emotional support. We try and give them as a comfortable last few days, months, whatever it is as possible. And in America, they have something called a hospice care. Hospice is like the last stage. Very often people, my mother, for example, she died at home, and she didn't need to be hospitalized. She didn't need a hospice. You come and you have the nurses and whatever come to the home, and they're able to look after the person as much as they can. But in America, they have this, not in every country, they have this differentiation between a hospice and palliative care. And like a hospice is like really the last stage of palliative care, which can be the last few weeks or few months. Now, what is very important to understand, both in the medical world and according to the halakha world, is there's a difference between withholding treatment and withdrawing treatment. Okay? Withholding treatment means if somebody has a certain illness and you've decided not to do anymore. So I give an example of my mother. My mother had chemotherapy, she had cancer, and slowly, the cancer was taken over the internal organs, and the internal organs were still destroyed. Do you now have to, and she was on antibiotics and she was on certain medication. There was a time where you couldn't do any more chemotherapy. Enough, it wasn't going to help anymore. So the question is, are you allowed to withhold therapy? That means, let's say she had a certain problem with her kidneys, and there's like a certain procedure you have to do. That is a new problem which came now in the last few weeks of her life. So withholding therapy means that you don't have to, the definition is that you don't have to do new, you just withhold. However, withdrawing therapy would mean that if she's on a drip with antibiotics because she has some sort of infection, or if she has diabetes and she's on a drip with certain medication, and you take away, you're withdrawing that medication because you know the diabetes is going to cause, when it's not regulated, it's going to cause problems with her blood sugar, and that's going to kill her. Then you can't do that. That's the difference between withdrawing treatment, that means stopping treatment which you already have been given until now, and withholding new treatment. That means you don't have to give new treatment, and that's going to be a big difference both from a medical point of view and also from a halakha point of view, but it's very important to understand this differentiation. Now, what's important, and what Moshe says in Choshen Mishpat, that age does not bear any difference on this. That means if somebody is 9 years old, if somebody is 99 years old, and he's healthy, he doesn't have any major issues, age does not come into a factor as to what type of treatment you give this person. But very often, in a hospital setting, they might say, okay, this guy's lived his life, he's had a great life, and now he's 99. I'm not talking about someone who's terminally ill. He had an infection. He had pneumonia. There is absolutely no reason, just because he's 99 years old, not to give him a treatment. 99-year-old, sometimes you give him a treatment, he can live another 4 or 5 years perfectly happy and healthy. So age does not come into a factor when we're talking about these different halachot. What comes into effect is whether, like we said, chayei sha'a, if it's someone with a terminally ill disease. So the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, brought down by Professor Abraham, he is a great professor. He lives in my neighborhood in Jerusalem, in Beit Begam. I've spoken to him at length on these subjects, and he says there's a difference between withdrawing treatment and withholding treatment with somebody who's terminally ill. And that's what I can pass. I can give people the exact sources if necessary. But he talks about, for example, whether it's feeding. I remember with my mother. My mother, it was very difficult for her to eat and drink. So she used to have special. Liquidated food which she used to drink, and some doctor said, you don't have to give her, to drink. She's okay. She's fine without it. And we said, no. What do you mean you don't have to give her to drink? She's still alive. She's not in a great sense of, physically, unfortunately, but she's still alive. What do you mean don't give her to drink? And we did. We used to give her to drink. And it was interesting because I was away. My brother didn't, really realize how much she was drinking, because you don't always have, total control over it. I mean, we started seeing a deterioration in the last few weeks of her life, and then it was Min HaShamayim. We had to call the doctor on Shabbat. And again, even for Chayei Sha'ah, somebody who is in the last weeks, you can still be Mechalel Shabbat if necessary. There's a certain issue. We called the doctor, and because it was on Shabbat, he wasn't a regular doctor. The regular doctor had his day off. And it was and we said, what are you doing? You're not drinking. I can see here the chart, how much she's been drinking. You have to start giving her to drink. And then she had having problem with her kidneys and other issues. And then she started drinking again. And then, the kidneys were back to normal within like a few days. So how can you withhold nutrition or drink or food from somebody who's dying. Just because they're dying doesn't mean that you have to hasten their death and let them starve to death. So he talks about the basic needs of a dying patient or person in their last months. You have to give them, whether it's food, whether it's hydration, whether it's basic antibiotics. You're not allowed to withdraw, and you're not allowed to even withhold the basic food, drink, the basic type of medication which they will need in order to keep them going. And the other thing which is important to understand, this also, the Moshe Feinstein says, if they need to have, for example, a breathing mask, they're having difficulties breathing, you're not allowed to withhold them. You're not allowed to withhold them. So, but there is a stage, so for example, when my mother started to pass away, we didn't have to do, we were allowed to withhold from her certain, if you, again, in medical terms, they call it, let's say, advanced treatment, or they call it, special treatment. And this is, for example, with my mother, when she passed away, when her heart started beating, there was no need to start resuscitating her. And the reason is because, according to the halakha, and this is really important, and I don't want people to misunderstand or misquote me, so I'm going to be giving the guidelines, but it's better not to, you should ask basically if you didn't really, even if you understood it, because everything has to be a case by case, but Professor Abraham says, if somebody is terminally ill, that's number one, that means there's no cure. Number two, they're suffering from pain which is unbearable, then in this situation, then you're allowed to withhold something like aggressive treatment. And aggressive treatment would be something like resuscitation. Okay? And he adds in, I 100% agree that it has to be, you should ask a rabbi who understands. So like I said, this organization, I'm sure rabbis in Los Angeles as well, a part of it where it's called Chaim Arukim, where they actually, they'll assist the families in these situations. But again, if it's a terminally ill patient, that means there's no cure, and this person is suffering unbearable pain, which normally they do, unfortunately. They have to give them pain medication in order to cope with the pain. And all the resuscitation is going to do is temporarily keep them alive in this situation of pain where it's not going to be able to cure them. Then you're allowed to withhold that treatment. Okay? Once a rabbi is being consulted who understands these.
Why is it called aggressive?
Okay, so this is great. They call it aggressive. Now this, and you have to understand this, it's very difficult because what does aggressive mean? So I've spoken to doctors before, and they say, for example, if you want to resuscitate someone, of course that's aggressive if you break their ribs, you've broken their ribs, but no doctor in their right mind would not resuscitate a 19-year-old who collapsed outside at risk of breaking his ribs. Because broken ribs heal. It might not be very nice or comfortable, but you save this person's life. So the word aggressive has become a bit manipulated, and they can say, ooh, aggressive. So what's not aggressive? And this is very difficult, and this is exactly the problem here, and this is where people have to be careful, and you have to understand, the doctors, Khalilan, are not even saying this, they're not bad people, they have a different way of thinking, and and I've read about this, they think it's best for the patient, best for the patient's family, they see them suffering, and best for society at large. Another person could be cured might need the same treatment as that. Now in America, where you have private insurance and the doctors have to listen to you, they don't have much of a choice. They have to listen to you. What they can do is pressure you either to write an advanced directive like a will or healthcare proxy, or they'll put pressure on you in hospitals. And any oncologist or any internalist that I've spoken to who's religious even a non-Jewish one who understands. I know, let's say in the UK, for example, so the Asian doctors, they have like a kind of a different mentality to end of life to, let's say, the normal British doctors. And this is very important to understand. And also in the States, and any religious doctor I've spoken to says this is our biggest fight, which we have within the hospital grounds. And very often, like I said, the families, they can't cope emotionally, and once they get the okay from a doctor, so okay, we just live and die, and they'll call it, don't do aggressive therapy, it's the quality of life, you're just causing pain, you're not going to be able to cure them, and this is very important, yes?
DNR and aggressive treatment, we think that more mean that intubation, connecting to machine, and opening the stomach and put back. We want to know for the older people, age more than 65 and up, with the bad disease, for example, not very curable. Most of people are scared to be intubated and connected to machine. Because very difficult to disconnecting, and a lot of vessels, a lot of things come. What's the Judaism idea about the connecting to machine, intubation, and stomach feeding?
Yeah, to give. So I'm going to be speaking about artificial hydration in a minute, and these are very difficult things. There's 100%. But again, I'm going to give the guideline. There's for example, all these questions have only come up recently, let's say from the 1960s, because 70, 80 years ago, we couldn't help these people anymore. So if somebody, for example, has, I don't know, some throat cancer or stomach cancer, and he's not able to eat, or he's not able to breathe by himself, so what happens is they have to give him artificial nutrition, and then if he survives the cancer, then they can take away the artificial nutrition, and he'll be able to live many years. And the question is, what do you...
Old and terminal.
So this is what I said. Old is nothing to do, doesn't come into the criteria, because you can have old people. My grandfather, he passed away after my mother. He was healthy until he was 97, and he died in bed one morning, and that was the end. He had no health issues, major health issues all his life. So for someone like him, if he needed artificial feeding, this is a question I was in deal for Shabbat, and somebody asked me, their father had mild Alzheimer's, because you have to understand, also with Alzheimer's, there's a spectrum, and he had mild Alzheimer's, but he could more or less communicate. Obviously, it's not a very nice situation, but he wasn't able to swallow. And he asked me in this situation, he didn't actually, he asked me if he did the right thing, because the doctor said do not attach a feeding tube to him, because to put a nasal feeding tube is very difficult, because they take them out, and then that's really complicated, because obviously it's easier, let's say medically, but it's maybe a bit uncomfortable, and they keep on pulling it out, and here you hear the stories of they have to tie their hands together in order that they don't pull them out. So obviously that's very difficult, and there's a lot of, you see the pain, you see the difficulty, and to tie someone up, that obviously is the worst thing that possibly can happen. But sometimes, I don't know, with psychiatric patients, and you have to hold them down, sometimes to save someone's life, you have to do this. So what they do is they can attach a feeding tube directly to the body, and that way he'll be able to have nutrition. And I said, did he have any other ailments? No. Otherwise, everything was fine. He was a total working order. So why not put the feeding tube? So they said, no, it's aggressive. There are risks. Of course there are risks. Yeah, there's risks, by any medication. If you have a list, also. But the risk is minimal. If you don't give him to eat, this guy is going to be dead within 2 weeks, and you basically starved him to death. He can't eat, he's going to choke. So in medical literature, there's a big argument, and I'm not saying I don't understand them. I understand where they're coming from, and I think it's important to understand where they're coming from, but I disagree with them. And I definitely disagree And I'm against the doctors who manipulate the facts, because what do they say? They say a feeding tube will not cure. No one says a feeding food will not cure Alzheimer's. It won't cure anything. I agree 100%. We're not talking about curing here. So what they'll do is they'll write, it's been proven with a meta-analysis of 100 different research papers that feeding tubes will not cure. Okay, you're right. I totally agree. We're not trying to cure the guy. We're trying to feed him. And you have to be very careful how you read and hear what the doctor said. And it's more than that. It's actually impossible to do real research about feeding tubes. What are you going to do? How does research work? Let's say someone from the community, he managed to make a new drug. A new drug. So what do you do? If you want to get FDA approval of a drug, you have to do certain tests. There's a lot of criteria. So the test would be, for example, you'll take 500 people who have, let's say, it's for someone who has kidney problems. You take 500 people who don't, who have this kidney problem, and then 250 you'll give them this drug, and then 250. There are different ways of doing trials. Well, let's call it a random controlled trial, which basically means, especially if it's a double-blinded trial, but they don't know which drug they're going to be taking, and also the researchers don't know. They take 500 drugs, 250 of them have the actual medication inside. The other 250 don't have them. They're all numbered. You don't know, they look identical. The researcher doesn't know which is the real drug, and the patient doesn't know, and you give 500 people randomly this drug. That means 250 have taken, 250 haven't. After a few months, you test them to see if there's any benefits to the people, and then you take the codes and you see which two. You do all the research, and only afterwards you have a look and see who took the drugs and who didn't. That's the most classical and the best way to do research. Again, you don't always do it that way. And you also have to be careful how you read, what type of research, but I'm not going to go into that. You can't do that with 500 elderly Alzheimer's patients, because what are you going to do? We're going to do, and so they'll say, there's no research on this. Of course there's no research on this. You can't do, what are you going to do? You're going to take 250 people, say, okay, we're going to starve you to death, and we're going to take 250 people, we're going to give you a tube, and then we're going to compare you after a few weeks. Who in their right mind is going to go into this research? No research has been done. But you can't ethically do research like this. But I can tell you, anyone who doesn't eat for 2 weeks, even the most healthiest guy, is going to be dead in 2 weeks. And surely someone with Alzheimer's as well. And you think a doctor in their right mind, if someone has throat cancer and they can't eat, but they're not going to, who's 20 years old, but they're not going to give him a tube? Oh, what about the risks? Isn't it aggressive? Yeah, it is. Exactly the same as this guy. So he's a bit older. Okay. He might still be able to live, and that's also a very interesting question, which I'm not going to go into now. To what risks are you allowed to have an operation? Let's say someone, Khalid, is 65 years old, and he knows he's got 6 months to live. And the doctors tell him, listen, we've got this operation which we can do. If it works, you're going to live another 10, 20 years, no problem. If it doesn't work, you're going to be dead very shortly, within a few days. Are you allowed to do this? I'm not going to go into that now. But Moshe Feinstein and others do speak about it, and more often than not you can, but I'm not going to go into that now. But the question is, you have to be very careful. The doctors put pressure. They can manipulate their words. They can manipulate the medical. They'll say, listen, there's been no research to prove that this is okay. Agreed. 100% research that you can't be cured. So you have to be very careful. We're not trying to cure. We don't want our father to starve to death. Is there anything wrong with that? We are willing to take a little risk to have a minor surgery. Feeding tubes are put in every day around the whole world, and always there's going to be some type of risk. But you can have risks also by going to the dentist. People have died unfortunately by giving, a risk to everything which. Obviously there's more risk with that than going to a dentist, but I'm just trying to give the idea. So you have to try and make yourself aware of the facts, and when you're emotionally involved in this, and you see a parent which no one wants to see, and that's 100%, no one disagrees with that. So that's why, so this person, and I told this guy, you did 100% right. Your father now can live another 20 years. So an Alzheimer's person, that's it, we don't care for him anymore. We don't care, his life is, worthless because he has stage 1 Alzheimer's. That's it, he's a burden to society. So what should we do? Why don't we just, all the people with Alzheimer's, give them euthanasia if they're so irrelevant to society? And what about with people with mental health issues and psychiatric problems where they're never going to be cured? So do we go into psychiatric hospitals with people with advanced psychiatric issues, and that's it? We just pull the plug on the hospital and we don't give them medication and we don't give them food and we don't give them treatment? And then we have a society where we're just looking after the fittest people. Where do we draw the line? So according to the halakha, the line is drawn. Like I said, somebody who has a terminal, and a terminal illness has to be diagnosed correctly. A terminal illness, that means there's no way, and no one in his situation lived, longer than a few months, and he's in unbearable suffering. And all the aggressive, again, how we determine aggressive is going to be different. We're not talking about normal, basic medication, whether it's for somebody who needs medication for his blood pressure, or he needs medication for his diabetes. This is just normal medication. There's no actual detrimental effect going to happen to him. And we're not talking about withdrawing or withholding basic oxygen or food. Someone who, to do aggressive treatment like CPR or putting him to a ventilator, and all you're going to do is extend his life of suffering temporarily. So again, I don't want to give the exact halachic ruling, but it's always better to ask a rabbi. In those situations, you would be allowed to withhold, okay? And obviously in the medical world, they're not going, they already withhold way before from what I'm speaking about, yes.
Halacha, is there any room for mercy killing, or is there any talk about it?
For what?
Mercy killing?
Oh, okay, so we'll speak, I'm going to speak about euthanasia towards the end. So regarding...
What about oxygen? What about oxygen?
Well, basic, so the Moshe Feinstein, for example, says basic oxygen, there's going to be a difference that's given an oxygen mask. Someone have been different. Again, not everyone, in Israel, for example, you see it in all the pictures, so the president of Israel, his wife, she has to have like an oxygen tube. Many people may carry the oxygen. She's totally healthy, doesn't have other issues. Because if she was 90 or whatever, you don't do that, Okay, I'll give you another example. Ariel Sharon. Yeah, Ariel Sharon, for example, he had permanent brain damage. I'm not going to go into it now because I have another shiur about, are you allowed to take somebody off a life support machine or ventilation? That's like, we have to go into the physiology and anatomy of the brain. It's very, very long discussion, but I'm not going to go into that now. Basically, you have there are different parts of the brain which, control different parts of our bodily movements and functions. So there's something at the back of the brain, it's called the brain stem. In the middle of the brain, in the medulla, it's called, that is what controls our breathing. That gives us, when we breathe, that's the medulla which does it. And the rest of the brain has, on the visual effects, on different, it looks after different parts of our bodily functions and development. So if the brainstem, Khalila, has been destroyed, then a person won't be able to breathe naturally by themselves. They won't be able to breathe naturally by themselves. And if you give them a ventilator, then basically, artificially, then you can keep them breathing, you're bringing in oxygen in and out of the body, you're keeping them alive artificially. So something like that already is going to, in America, by the way, so this is also very complicated because I've gone into this into great detail. Different countries, even in America, different states have different laws. Whether it's regarding mercy killing or whether when are you considered dead, what is the definition of death, and also what diagnosis test do you do to determine that person is dead. And it's very interesting, all this has come about since the 1960s when they started organ transplantation, because they want to be able to keep a person alive in order to use their organs, because once you die, once the heart stops beating, then it's nearly impossible to use most of the organs. What they do is they wait, and it's something called the Harvard criteria. In 1968, they wrote a committee in the University of Harvard. They came together and they wrote a criteria, when are you dead? And they write there that they had to come to new criteria because there would be no organ donation otherwise. That when you're brain dead, when your brain stops working, how they do that, that's a different question. How do they determine that? Then that is considered that you're dead. So your heart could be artificially ventilated, so you are breathing, but the second they'll take out the ventilation, then a few minutes later the heart will stop beating. Now the reason why they do that, they want the heart beating because they want to help this other guy who needs a heart transplant. So they had to redefine the definition of death in order to facilitate organ donation. It's very complicated, I'm not going to go into that now. But that is, for example, when you're brain dead. Now someone can have a brain disease, so if, let's say, and it's very important to understand the difference. So someone can be in a coma. Not everyone in a coma is dead. Somebody can be what we call a vegetative state. That means a persistent vegetative state. That means, I don't like this word like a vegetable, that's what they use, i.e. he's not, but he can breathe by himself. So Ariel Sharon, for example, could breathe by himself and he lived 7 years. So that means his brainstem was fine. He was breathing unassisted. So how did he live so long? So they had to give him feeding tube, otherwise you would die for starvation. So that, for example, that according to all criteria in every country in the world, you're considered alive. So for example, you would not be able to take organs out of him. Now, the question is, if somebody's in such a state, were you allowed to, like, mercy killing, or are you allowed to euthanize? And I will come back to the end, but even from a legal point of view, and it's very important to understand these differentiations, and I don't know if in just one in one class we're going to be able to do that, but everything is really confusing and they seem so similar. So he's in a coma and he's a persistent vegetative state and he's brain dead and this is the whole brain, or if it's the brain stem, or if we don't understand the nuances and the definitions correctly, you're going to get very, very confused. And then imagine the family, when they see their loved one in so much pain, and they'll say, no, this is what we do, and this is the problem, because very often it can be against the halakha, and you have to be very, very careful with this. So, for example, I'll give you an example. Very often, even in the States, there's big difference of opinion between doctors regarding the definition of death, how you diagnose this, and how you determine quality of life. Quality of life is not a medical issue. A doctor has no right to, or a lawyer has no right to determine what quality of life is more than me or you. This is a moral issue, an ethical issue. And so, just like if they want to determine according to their way of understanding, we can also, and as a Jewish people, we definitely value life. No one can take that away from us. But like I said, there would be certain situations that they might say, oh, we spoke to Rabbi and he said that it's a similar situation. What does it mean a similar situation? That's why you have to be very careful. Say, oh, I heard the Rabbi said you can take them off a ventilator. Oh, I could sign the DNR form. I don't know exactly what situation. And I'll tell you something incredible. In this, I've spoken to doctors, there's been research that if somebody goes in to a hospital with a DNR form, which means do not resuscitate, do not resuscitate means you don't have to do resuscitation. It does not mean do not treat. Do not treat means you just leave them. But psychologically, and this has been proven by research, that if you have patients who come into the hospital, the emergency room, with a DNR, they are going to do much worse than another patient who hasn't signed the DNR form, even when they don't need to be resuscitated. Because psychologically what happens is that, okay, it's alright, That's what they vote. And morally and legally, they'll just say, okay, he's saying that. I mean, even when we don't him, this has been proven. This has been proven. So how can you reign when in your 30s or 40s? But that's basically signing a death sentence. And they won't look after you as well. And when I spoke to doctors, and they say, unfortunately, this is all too true, and this is common practice. Because there's a lot of, a lot of pressure in hospitals. There's many things which they have to do. So when they have to make choices as well, they must say, okay. So you have to be very, very careful. And for example, somebody who does have a feeding tube, or if you read the research about these of the organizations who are very anti-feeding tubes, or prolonging a terminally ill person's life, because they can, medicine is very advanced, you'll see that very often they will still prolong them if they have what they call unfinished business. Or if they're waiting for a relative, or someone special, or their dog, to come and say goodbye to them. So then they would also want to prolong their life, and if possible, before they withdraw this. And this isn't legally called mercy killing. We have to understand that mercy killing is a proactive way of, let's say, giving them medication where without it they wouldn't have died. This is just what in the language of the halakha will say kum ve'aseh or shev al te'aseh. Shev al te'aseh means we'll just leave it and let them die naturally. So we won't give them a feeding tube, but we won't give them medication. I didn't actively do something to kill them. I just withheld. So again, according to the halakha, we would make a distinction, even with a terminally ill, and please don't misquote me or don't get this wrong, regarding withholding. You can never withhold basic food, hydration, nutrition, or oxygen, or basic medicine. That will never be warranted. We can only withhold from a terminally ill, I think, aggressive, again, which is definitely not going to cure in a person who's full of suffering. So don't say, the Rabbi said that you can withdraw food. No, food, drink. No one would ever let you food, drink, basic oxygen mask. No one would ever. It's complicated, I agree, but this is like for the first level, and at least you have enough knowledge here that you'll be able to ask forward and understand the workings of it. So this is very important to understand, and like I said, I can bring all the different sources if necessary. Now, what is also very important to understand regarding pain management, there's a bit of a misunderstanding here. Very often, pain management, nowadays we don't have to always use morphine so much as other, and morphine can also kill a person if it's too powerful, but normally the doctor's pain is also, the halakha understands pain to, even though it doesn't cure a person, but you don't want to see a person in unbearable suffering, and that definitely would be, you're allowed to be mechalel Shabbat, says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, even for pain medication as well, if somebody, it's unbearable pain, and also even if in the long run the morphine could somehow kill them, just as long as each bit of each time you medicate, it's not going to cause them to die, even though in the long run. But I don't think nowadays pain medicine is now an advanced type of medicine understanding, and the doctors, they understand this and they'll be able to gauge in order to give relief from pain without putting severe danger to the actual person. But that's also very important to understand. In London, so in the UK, there was a soccer match, and there's a guy called Muamba. I think he was from Africa, and suddenly his heart stopped in the middle of. He had a heart attack in the middle of the field, and so they ended up doing resuscitation for 78 minutes on this guy, and then they managed to get his heart. With anyone else, no way would they do it for that long. Definitely not for an elderly. I don't know if you heard in the UK about this kid called Alfie Evans. Did you hear about this case? So this was a terrible case of a 3-year-old kid that he had degenerative brain disease where he was slowly dying and only 30% of his brain was working. And the hospital, and this is a crazy thing in the UK because the hospitals are state-run. So that means they're the ones who are caring for you. It's not like in the States where you decide. And they decided on the parents' behalf that they would withdraw him from the life support machine. And they took away his oxygen and he died within like 3-4 days. And so much so they wouldn't even allow him to take him to another country where they would give him life support machine. This is like the British, it's like the NHS is like much more of a social way of dealing with the patients, and they have the right, unfortunately, the legal right to determine what is the best interest of this kid. Now, if he had the brain stem was gone, then he would normally, if someone's brain stem was gone and they cannot breathe by themselves, they would be dead within a few minutes. That this kid died after 4 or 5 days, and that's a terrible thing, and it caused uproar around the world. How can you do such a thing? And that wouldn't necessarily be called mercy killing, because they didn't actually inject with him, medication to kill him. But what they did was they took away from him his ventilation, where he could breathe by himself. He was no way considered dead by any means. So, for example, would they have been allowed legally to use his organs for another kid if the parents agreed to that? No, they wouldn't, because the criteria is you have to be the brain stem of being dead. And here, there's no question. And there have been cases, even a few, May 6th, I have over here, there's a boy regains consciousness after parents sign papers to donate his organs. Sometimes it's very difficult to know. You should realize organ donation is normally with people who had car accidents or some sort of accident, because people get to hospital with a terminal illness, their organs normally they can't be reused in any case. And I think only you have to be under 65, for example. But there have been cases where parents sign organ donation and then the people wake up. Why? Because it's a very, very grey area, both regarding how you determine death and also, more important, how they diagnose according to their determination. This is something very, very difficult. So there's a case in Australia, I don't know if you heard, literally a few weeks ago. His name was David Goodall, who was 104 years old. I don't know if you heard about this case. So in Australia, and this is also important, and even here in California, they just had, I don't know what happened in the end, but I read a few weeks ago that they tried to bring into law that you're allowed to have euthanasia. Now, different countries in different states have different criteria. So there are countries, let's say in Holland or in Belgium, where you would be allowed to give, it's what they call mercy killing or assisted suicide, whatever you want to call it, where they give them they prescribe them lethal medication, which will let them die, within like a few minutes. And in many countries, this is illegal. Many countries, let's say in the United Kingdom. There are many countries where it's not illegal, but they will turn a blind eye. The doctors won't be prosecuted, so they can just do it and nothing will really happen. So there are countries like Holland where they will only allow it under certain circumstances, for example, with terminally ill people where they've actually been given their consent as well. So in the States, I think even here in California, it came into law, but a judge ruled it on a technicality that it was considered unconstitutional. But they're going to be trying to bring it into law here in California as well. But this guy, he was 104, totally healthy. He had no major issues. He just had enough. Literally, he was 104. And he said, and I saw the clip, he said, yeah, listen, it's difficult. I once fell and it's difficult walking and that's it, I've had enough. So even in Australia, where they do have in certain areas of that country, mercy killing orders only for uncurable patient with an uncurable illness, and he didn't have it. No other country has this apart from Switzerland. Switzerland from the 1950s, you can just go there. If you're 100% healthy, mentally, physically, you can just go, can you please, like you go to the doctor and get prescribed for, for a headache or some sort of thing, we can do that. And that's very good of the suicide capital of the world. So he just went there and he decided, now that's unbelievable how such a country can do that. That's murder. That is absolute murder. Even mercy killing is murder. Not merciful at all. But only certain situations, like I said, that you can withdraw aggressive, that's like CPR, that's like, serious medical interactions to a, like I said, somebody who has a terminally ill, diagnosed, we're all, at the end of the day, we're all slowly dying, I suppose. Everyone's terminal. Terminal means when there's an end. Again, we go to Olam Haba B'ezrat Hashem, but, it has to be a terminally ill person with unbearable suffering, where it's an aggressive treatment which is only going to temporarily extend his pain and suffering with a halachic ruling. The last thing, and I'm going to finish with this, and this is in order to understand the end of life, we have to understand the value of life. We have to understand the second. And if people want to succeed, they have to really grab life. There was a case in Israel recently that a religious lady, where when she was like 23, she had like 2 or 3 kids by then. She was told that she has terminal cancer, and she was given prognosis of like a year and a half. And she said, and she managed to live 9 years after that. But she said when she had this on top of her head, knowing that she's going to die, she didn't go into depression. But I didn't speak about this. Very often, terminally ill people go into depression. It's very important, and also very important, again, halacha lema'aseh, because I don't want people to take this talk as halacha lema'aseh as to what treatment you can give and what you can't give. I've just given very general guidelines, but hopefully giving an understanding. But what is important, halacha lema'aseh, asking a rabbi who understands this. But if it is pikuach nefesh, if you're worried, you're saying, wow, I'm even a safek, that means you're in doubt, you just call the doctor, you call the ambulance, you don't have to worry, Khalila, that you made a mistake, you did a good thing, you shouldn't even hesitate. The next thing, really important, really important, if people are hospitalized, it's always important that there's going to be another member of family going with them. Because if a person doesn't have, for 2 reasons, number one, this is like we said before, if you sign a DNR, they might not treat you. The more family present in the hospital, the more doctors are going to take notice and going to try and help the patient. So that's a pikuach nefesh as well. Even if he's unconscious and they don't need you, let's say, for emotional support, but just by you being there and saying, hey doctor, what's going on? Are you looking after my father, my mother, my son, whatever? They're going to, oh, okay. That's it. It's going to be the guy next door who has no relatives there. They're going to be looking after you because you're the one. Hey, what's going on here? Look after him. Why can't you do this? I want another opinion. I want a second opinion. Even for pikuach nefesh, you're allowed to go there. And also, just from an emotional point of view, people who have terminal illness, they can suffer depression, and that's really important to help people in this time. And the last, this is really important to understand. And when you hear Khalila of people, as a community, they have to have support. If there are people in the community who, even if it's not terminal illness, a kid has cancer, and he'll, there's a good chance that he's going to get out of it. It's really important for the rabbis, for the local community, to get together, help the other kids, make sure how they get into school, who's helping the kids with their homework, who's helping, taking the kids on outings. There's a lot of pressure which is on the family. It could be even if they don't need financial help. Sometimes they need financial help, but sometimes it's just organization. What about food? Taking the kids to school, taking them back, all these things. Really important when the community gets together, helping families in these times. And the last thing, and this is really important, we have to understand the value of life. We can't understand fully the end of life if we don't understand each second. And unfortunately, people have to ask themselves, am I being as productive as I can? In all different ways. Am I the father that I should be? Am I giving enough time and effort to my kids? Am I giving enough time and effort to my wife? Am I spending too much time at work, or too much time on YouTube, or too much time doing other stupid things? And this is really important, which everyone has to ask themselves. Am I doing enough for my community? Am I doing enough for my health? Am I looking after myself? Because very often, when we're not put in these situations, then we can take life for granted, and we don't really use our life productively enough, and we cannot, do as much as we can. Successful people, they value every second, and they try to be as productive as they can. And this is a fight, an internal fight, which everyone has within ourselves, because no one, at the end of the day, we don't know how long we're going to live. It says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, "V'shuv yom echad lefi mitatcha." Naturally, we always think we're going to be living forever. So this young lady, that she was told that she has terminal cancer, she's going to live 1.5 years. So she was strong, and she managed to overcome at least after the first few weeks of the shock, that she decided to take her life into her hands. And she said, and I saw this amazing interview with her, that she said, I might have lived only 8 years, from when I was told, 8-9 years from when I was told that I had the diagnosis, but I feel that I've done much more than people who have lived into the 80s or 90s. Why? Because every single day she used to the full, whether as a mother, as a child, as a wife, as a person to the community, and she ended up writing books and giving lectures and doing things which she said, I never would have had the opportunity to have done that. So we don't need, Khalila, to have this terminal illness on top of our head in order to be productive. And it's because we naturally feel that we're going to live forever. And this is what we have to understand. V'shuv yom lifnei mitatcha. Very often people talk about the bucket list. This is what I was in London a few weeks ago, and I met this 70-year-old family friend. I hadn't seen him for a long time, and I said, hey, how you doing? He said, yeah, I just came back from Peru, and I said, why? How come you went there? He said, no, I wanted to go skydiving. It was on my bucket list, That's okay, that's nice, but a Jewish bucket list is that he wakes up, from the second he says Modeh in the morning until he says Kriyat Shema L'Amita, he tries to be as productive as possible. He tries to be a good spouse, he tries to be a good sibling, he tries to be a good son, daughter, he tries to be a good parent, he tries to be good to the community. This is what we have to realize. Every person just says to himself, I'm going to try, just be a bit more productive. Well, I don't have to do major things. Then that person changes, the family changes, the whole community changes. I'd like to thank, again, Yachad Kollel for inviting me today. It's been a tremendous honor. Since I was here last year, I've had a great connection with many of the Rabbanim in the community. I've managed to help many, many people, and I hope that this connection will get stronger and stronger, and B'ezras Hashem we'll have more meetings, and to see this beautiful, vibrant community taking every second to be as productive. Bigger binyanim, more avrechim, B'ezras Hashem, more Torah, more chesed, more gimut chasadim, B'ezras Hashem. This is a real testimony to how people should run the Kehilot B'ezras Hashem. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank the Rabbi also, and you hear what Rabbi is doing.